"I don't want to eat this," pleads the girl, but the stepmother pushes the moldy bread with disdain. The millionaire father arrives earlier than expected and finds his trembling daughter on the kitchen floor. What he decides to do is shocking. Chapter 1. Silent Shadows. The marble countertops of the Westbrook Mansion's kitchen gleamed under the artificial light, a stark contrast to the darkness settling in 6-year-old Lily's heart. She sat cross-legged on the cold tiles, her small frame shivering as Vanessa Westbrook loomed over her. Impeccably dressed in a crimson designer dress that matched her perfectly manicured nails. "Eat it. Lily, all of it." Vanessa's voice was honey-coated poison, pushing the plate of stale bread closer to the child. This is what happens when ungrateful little girls waste food. They learn to appreciate what they're given. Lily's stomach churned at the sight of the moldy bread. Her fingers trembled as she picked up a piece, tears welling in her eyes. 3 months since her father had remarried. 3 months of these private moments of cruelty when he wasn't looking. "I'm not hungry." "Please," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Vanessa's perfectly composed face twisted into something ugly. "I don't care if you're hungry. You'll sit here until it's gone. Your father spoiled you rotten. It's time someone taught you discipline." The sound of tires on the gravel driveway made Vanessa freeze. She checked her diamond-studded watch. 3:45 p.m. Much too early for Richard to be home. The transformation that followed was like watching a mask slide into place. The hardness in her eyes melted away, replaced by practiced warmth. Her rigid posture softened, and her voice took on a maternal quality that made Lily's skin crawl. "Sweetheart, please finish your snack before Daddy comes in. He'll be so disappointed if he thinks you're being difficult again." Vanessa stroked Lily's hair, the same hand that had yanked it that morning. "Remember our little secret? Daddy works so hard. We don't want to upset him with silly complaints, do we?" Richard Westbrook, founder and CEO of Westbrook Technologies, had built his empire from nothing. At 38, he was the darling of Silicon Valley, a self-made billionaire whose innovative security software had revolutionized the industry. For years, he'd been an absent father, buried in work after the accident that had left his first wife, Elizabeth, in a persistent vegetative state. The guilt of choosing an important meeting over family time that fateful day had consumed him, driving him further into his work and away from his daughter. His marriage to Vanessa, Elizabeth's distant cousin who had appeared to offer support during the family crisis, had been partly driven by his desire to give Lily a mother figure. On paper, Vanessa Carlyle had been perfect, educated, sophisticated, and seemingly devoted to both him and his daughter. The front door opened as Richard entered, setting down his briefcase. Something had felt off during the board meeting. The quarterly numbers were excellent. But when discussions had turned to family vacation plans, Richard had realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd spent a full day with Lily. On impulse, he'd delegated the remaining meetings to his COO and driven home. "Hello? Anyone home?" Richard called out, his voice echoing through the spacious foyer. "In the kitchen, darling." Vanessa's melodic response came instantly. When Richard walked in, the scene before him made him stop short. Lily sat on the floor, not at the breakfast nook where she usually ate. Her face was streaked with dried tears, and in front of her sat a plate with what appeared to be moldy bread. Vanessa stood beside her, a strained smile on her face. "What's going on here?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Oh, Richard, you're home early." Vanessa's voice carried a note of surprise. Poor Lily was being a bit difficult about her lunch earlier, so we're just having a little lesson about food appreciation. "Aren't we, sweetie?" Lily didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the plate, her small body trembling slightly. Richard approached, kneeling beside his daughter. The bread was definitely moldy. He looked at Lily, really looked at her for the first time in months. Her clothes were clean but plain, nothing like the colorful outfits Elizabeth used to dress her in. Her once vibrant brown hair hung limp, and she'd lost weight. How had he not noticed? "Lily, princess, you don't have to eat this," he said gently, pushing the plate away. He turned to Vanessa, confusion and the first stirrings of anger rising within him. "Oh, why is my daughter sitting on the floor with spoiled food?" Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened imperceptibly. "Richard, we've talked about this. Lily needs structure and consequences. She refused to eat her lunch, threw a tantrum, and wasted perfectly good food. I'm simply teaching her that actions have consequences. By feeding her mold. Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. It's just a little stale, darling. You're overreacting. Richard lifted Lily into his arms, feeling how light she was. Go wash up, princess. I'll be right there to help you pick out a clean outfit. When Lily had left the kitchen, Richard turned to his wife. That bread was moldy, Vanessa. What were you thinking? I'm trying to raise a responsible child, not a spoiled brat, Vanessa snapped, before quickly composing herself. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm just frustrated. Lily has been so difficult lately. She doesn't listen to me, throws tantrums when you're not around. I'm doing my best, but sometimes I feel like you undermine my authority. Richard studied his wife's face. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't quite place it. I think I need to spend more time at home. I've been too absent. A flicker of something annoyance, concern, crossed Vanessa's features before her smile returned. That would be wonderful, darling. We've missed you terribly. That night, after tucking Lily in, Richard cancelled his upcoming business trip. Over the next few days, he worked from home, observing the dynamics between his wife and daughter. What he saw disturbed him. Vanessa's affection toward Lily evaporated the moment she thought Richard wasn't watching. Lily's toys were mysteriously lost. Her meals were monitored with strange intensity, and Richard caught Lily staring at Vanessa with unmistakable fear. On the third night, he heard muffled crying coming from Lily's room. Following the sound, he was stunned to find her door locked from the outside. Inside, the room was dark, with a distinct smell of urine. Lily sat huddled in the corner of her bed, clutching her stuffed elephant, the only toy Vanessa hadn't accidentally thrown away. Daddy, she whispered when she saw him. Please don't be mad. I was just looking for Mommy's picture. Why would I be mad about that, princess? Richard asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. Mommy Vanessa says I'm not allowed to have Mommy's things. She says it makes her sad when I talk about Mommy. I found the special doll Mommy gave me in the attic, but Mommy Vanessa caught me. She said this was my punishment for being sneaky. Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long have you been locked in here, Lily? Since after lunch, Lily whispered. I tried to hold it, Daddy, but I couldn't anymore. I'm sorry I wet the bed. It was nearly midnight. Richard carried Lily to the bathroom, helped her clean up, and settled her in his home office on the pull-out sofa. When he confronted Vanessa, her excuses came quickly. The carpet cleaners left chemical residue that needed to dry, she said. And Lily's been making up stories again. You know how imaginative she is. I would never lock her in her room. But Richard had seen the key in the door with his own eyes. That night, after Vanessa had gone to bed, Richard sat in his office, Lily sleeping peacefully on the pull-out couch beside him. He opened his laptop and began to investigate. First his home security footage, then the trust fund he'd established for Lily after Elizabeth's accident. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The footage had been selectively deleted, entire afternoons missing. And the trust fund showed monthly withdrawals to a childhood development consultant he'd never heard of. The transfers required dual authentication, but his digital signature had been used without his knowledge. Someone had accessed his personal authorization codes. With trembling hands, Richard picked up his phone and dialed his old college roommate, now a private investigator specializing in family cases. Jake? It's Richard. I need your help. It's about Lily and Vanessa. I think something is very wrong in my house. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. Jake Matthews arrived at the Westbrook estate before dawn, parking his nondescript sedan a block away. At 40, he had the weathered look of someone who had seen too much of human nature's darker side. 15 years as a detective before going private had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about Richard's desperate call had set off every alarm bell. They met in Richard's private study, the heavy oak door locked behind them. Lily still slept in the connected office, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. Start from the beginning, Jake said, his voice low as he accepted the coffee Richard offered. Richard ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't even know where the beginning is anymore. I've been so blind, Jake, so wrapped up in my guilt over Elizabeth's accident that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. For the next hour, Richard detailed his observations. The locked room, the spoiled food, the missing toys, the fear in Lily's eyes. Jake took meticulous notes, occasionally glancing at the sleeping child through the partially open connecting door. "And the trust fund?" Jake asked. Richard pulled up the account statements on his laptop. 15 monthly transfers of $25,000 each to a company called Horizon Child Development. I never authorized these, but somehow my digital signature was used. That's nearly $400,000 siphoned from Lily's future. Jake studied the transaction records. LLC registered in Delaware, established 16 months ago. Convenient timing, right around when Vanessa entered your lives. I'll trace it. He tapped his pen against his notepad. What about before Elizabeth's accident? What was Vanessa's relationship to your family? Richard's brow furrowed. She appeared at the hospital after Elizabeth's accident, introduced herself as Elizabeth's cousin from her mother's side, said they'd lost touch years ago, but had reconnected through social media shortly before the accident. I wasn't thinking clearly then. Elizabeth's family is scattered, and I was desperate for any connection to her. Vanessa seemed genuinely concerned. She helped with Lily, managed the household when I couldn't function. Marrying her seemed logical for Lily's sake. Did you verify her connection to Elizabeth's family? The question hung in the air. Richard's silence was answer enough. I need to place surveillance equipment, Jake said finally. Hidden cameras, audio recorders. We need to document what happens when you're not around. Do it, Richard replied without hesitation. I also want you to investigate Vanessa's background thoroughly. Birth records, education, employment history, everything. Something doesn't add up. Jake nodded, pulling out a small device from his bag. This is a GPS tracker. Put it in her car. I'll monitor her movements. He hesitated before adding, Richard, what's your plan for Lily in the meantime? If what you suspect is true, leaving her alone with Vanessa is dangerous. Richard's jaw tightened. I've already arranged to work exclusively from home for the next 2 weeks. My assistant is rescheduling everything, so I won't leave Lily alone with her again. As dawn broke over the California hills, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn of the estate, Richard felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from his fog of guilt and neglect. Something fundamental had shifted inside him. The driven entrepreneur who had prioritized building his empire over his family was gone, replaced by a father with a singular focus, protecting his child. While Jake set up discreet monitoring equipment throughout the house, Richard took Lily out for breakfast at her favorite pancake house. Away from the mansion's oppressive atmosphere, Lily slowly began to open up. "Daddy, are you and Mommy Vanessa fighting because of me?" she asked, her small fingers fidgeting with her napkin. Richard's heart constricted. "No, Princess. None of this is because of you. You haven't done anything wrong. But Mommy Vanessa says I make you sad because I remind you of Mommy. She says that's why you stay away at work." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, as if reciting a lesson she'd been taught repeatedly. Richard reached across the table, gently taking her hands in his. "Lily, listen to me. You are the best part of my life. You could never make me sad. I've stayed away because I've been stupid and confused, not because of anything you did. But that's changing, starting now." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "Promise?" "I promise, Princess. I'm not going anywhere." When they returned home, Vanessa was waiting in the foyer, her face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Where have you two been?" "I was worried sick." She moved to embrace Lily, who instinctively shrank back against Richard's leg. "We went for pancakes," Richard said evenly. "Family time." Something flashed across Vanessa's face, irritation quickly suppressed. "You should have told me." "I'm family too." That afternoon, while Vanessa attended her weekly spa appointment, Richard and Jake reviewed the home security footage that hadn't been deleted. The cameras had captured Vanessa's transformation each time Richard left a room, the warmth in her expression vanishing, replaced by cold detachment or outright hostility toward Lily. "Classic emotional abuse," Jake commented grimly, as they watched Vanessa berate Lily for leaving a colored pencil on the living room table. Her voice dripping with venom one moment, saccharine sweet the next when she heard Richard approaching. She's methodically isolating the child, undermining her confidence, making her believe she deserves the treatment. They continued searching the mansion, methodically working through each room, while Lily napped under the watchful eye of Jake's assistant, a former child protective services worker. In the attic, behind a false wall in an antique armoire, they discovered a collection of items that chilled Richard to the bone. Elizabeth's personal effects that had supposedly been donated to charity after her accident, photo albums, jewelry, the vintage doll collection she had planned to pass down to Lily. Alongside these treasures were financial documents in Vanessa's handwriting, detailing accounts Richard had never known existed. Most disturbing of all was a locked metal box containing newspaper clippings about Elizabeth's accident, with certain details highlighted. The police report had concluded that Elizabeth had fallen down the stairs after tripping over a displaced runner carpet, resulting in her traumatic brain injury. The highlighted sections focused on witness statements, specifically the absence of any witnesses to the actual fall. There was someone else at the house that day, Richard whispered, memories rushing back. The housekeeper mentioned seeing a woman leaving just before she found Elizabeth. The police questioned her, but she couldn't provide a clear description. Just a woman in dark clothes and sunglasses. Jake's expression was grim. We need to find that housekeeper. As they closed up the attic, Richard's phone rang. The caller ID showed Pacific Memorial Hospital, where Elizabeth had been in long-term care for nearly 4 years. Mr. Westbrook, a professional voice began, this is Dr. Sharma from Neurology. I'm calling about your wife, Elizabeth Westbrook. Richard's heart stopped. Has something happened? Not exactly. We've been monitoring some unusual changes in her brain activity over the past week. Nothing concerning, but actually quite promising. I wanted to discuss adjusting her treatment plan. Would you be able to come in tomorrow? After hanging up, Richard turned to Jake, a faint hope kindling in his eyes. Elizabeth's doctor wants to see me. There's been a change in her condition. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Interesting timing. Listen, my contact at the Financial Crimes Unit just texted. That LLC, Horizon Child Development, it's registered to a woman named Victoria Carlyle. Does that name mean anything to you? Richard shook his head. No, I've never heard of her. Well, here's where it gets interesting. I had my tech guy run facial recognition on Vanessa's driver's license photo. He got a match to a Victoria Carlyle from Pennsylvania. The photos look identical, Richard. Same person, different names. Richard sank into a nearby chair, the implications washing over him like ice water. Who did I marry, Jake? That's what we're going to find out. But first, we need to make sure Lily remains safe. I think it's time we brought in someone else. Someone who might have witnessed Vanessa's behavior before you started paying attention. That evening, while Vanessa prepared dinner with her usual performative domesticity, Richard received a text from Jake. Found your former housekeeper. Maria Diaz, she's willing to talk. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Richard looked across the dining room at his wife, seeing her clearly for the first time. The calculated movements, the practiced smile, the cold eyes that watched Lily's every move like a predator. Whatever game Vanessa or Victoria was playing, he was now determined to end it. Is everything all right, darling? Vanessa asked, her voice honey-sweet. You've barely touched your food. Richard forced a smile. Everything's fine. Just thinking about a promising new development. Vanessa's smile remained fixed, but something in her eyes shifted, a momentary calculation, a flicker of wariness. Oh, what kind of development? Nothing concrete yet, Richard replied, meeting her gaze steadily. But I have a feeling everything is about to change. Across the table, Lily watched this exchange with the hypervigilance of a child who had learned to read the emotional currents around her for survival. She caught her father's eye, and for the first time in months she didn't immediately look away in fear. Instead, she offered a tiny, tentative smile, a fragile thing but real. Richard smiled back, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever secrets lurked beneath the surface of their lives, he would uncover them all. Chapter 3. Voices from the Past. The Corner Cafe sat at the intersection of Main and Maple in downtown Palo Alto, far enough from Westbrook Technologies and the family estate to ensure privacy. Richard arrived early, scanning the morning crowd of tech workers and university students. Jake had chosen this location carefully, public enough to be safe, anonymous enough to speak freely. Maria Diaz entered at precisely 10 a.m., still carrying herself with the quiet dignity Richard remembered. Now in her 50s, she had been the Westbrook family's housekeeper for nearly a decade, before abruptly resigning 3 months after Vanessa moved in. At the time, Richard had barely registered her departure, accepting Vanessa's explanation that Maria had found better-paying work elsewhere. Mr. Westbrook. Maria nodded as she sat down, her hands clasped tightly around her purse. It has been a long time. Thank you for coming, Maria. This means a lot. Richard studied her face, noting the wariness in her eyes. I think I owe you an apology, though I'm not entirely sure for what yet. Jake sat silently beside Richard, observing. Maria's gaze flickered between them before settling on Richard. How is Lily? She asked, her voice softening. Not good, Richard admitted. But I'm working to fix that. That's why we needed to talk to you. For a moment, Maria seemed to struggle with herself, weighing some internal decision. Then she reached into her purse and withdrew a small notebook. I was afraid this day would come, she said. When I left your home, it was not for another job. It was because I could not watch what was happening to Lily without speaking up. But when I tried... She trailed off, looking down at the notebook. Mrs. Westbrook threatened to accuse me of stealing. She said with her connections and your money, she would make sure I was deported, even though I have my citizenship. She said no one would believe me over her. Richard felt a wave of shame wash over him. I would have believed you. Maria's smile was sad. Would you? You barely saw what was happening in your own home, Mr. Westbrook. You were absent even when you were there. The truth of her words stung, but Richard nodded. You're right. I failed Lily. I failed everyone who tried to protect her. But I'm awake now and I need your help. Maria pushed the notebook across the table. I started documenting everything about 3 months before I left. Dates, times, what Mrs. Westbrook said or did when you weren't looking. The way Lily changed from a happy child to a frightened one. Her voice hardened. I also have recordings. Jake leaned forward. Recordings? Maria nodded, pulling out a USB drive. I used my phone. California is a 2-party consent state for recordings, I know this. But I was desperate. No one was protecting that child. As Jake took the USB, Richard asked the question that had been haunting him. Maria, you were there the day Elizabeth had her accident. Do you remember anything unusual? Maria's expression changed, a shadow crossing her face. I arrived that afternoon to find Mrs. Elizabeth at the bottom of the stairs. But earlier, when I was bringing groceries in through the kitchen, I saw a woman leaving through the side door. Not clearly, just a glimpse. She looked like Mrs. Elizabeth, but not exactly. I told the police, but they said without more details, it wasn't helpful. Now, knowing Mrs. Vanessa, she hesitated. There was something else, the stair runner. It was nailed down. Mrs. Elizabeth had it secured the week before because Lily had tripped on it. It shouldn't have moved. Richard and Jake exchanged glances. Did you tell the police this? Jake asked. Yes, but the nails were gone when they checked. They thought I was mistaken. After leaving Maria with promises of protection and a burner phone for secure contact, Richard and Jake drove directly to Pacific Memorial Hospital. Dr. Ananya Sharma, a neurologist specializing in traumatic brain injuries, met them in her office. Elizabeth's chart spread across her desk. We've been monitoring unusual patterns of brain activity for the past 10 days, she explained, pointing to the EEG readouts. Previously, Elizabeth's neural responses were minimal and inconsistent with conscious thought. But look here, she indicated a series of waves. These patterns suggest a potential for higher functioning. It's almost as if her brain is trying to re-establish pathways that were dormant. What does this mean? Richard asked, hope warring with caution in his voice. I don't want to give false expectations, Dr. Sharma said carefully. But I've seen similar patterns in patients who eventually regained some level of consciousness. It's rare but not unprecedented. I'd like to try a new treatment protocol. It's experimental but showing promising results in similar cases. As they discussed the details, Richard couldn't help but wonder about the timing. After nearly 4 years of no change, why was Elizabeth showing signs of improvement now? Later that afternoon, Richard sat in Elizabeth's private room, holding her limp hand as he had countless times before. The steady beep of monitoring equipment provided a rhythmic backdrop to his whispered confessions. I've made so many mistakes, Liz, he murmured. I wasn't there when you needed me. I wasn't there when Lily needed me. I've been hiding in my work, punishing myself by staying away from everything that reminded me of what I lost. But I'm here now and I'm not running anymore." He studied his wife's face, still beautiful despite the years of immobility. Once vibrant and expressive, her features had settled into peaceful blankness. Yet today, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. A subtle tension around her eyes, perhaps, or the way her fingers seemed to twitch occasionally against his palm. "Vanessa isn't who she claims to be," he continued, lowering his voice even though they were alone. "I don't know what her connection is to you, but I'm going to find out. I promise you I'll protect Lily with everything I have." When Richard returned home, he found Vanessa and Lily in the kitchen, baking cookies, a picture-perfect domestic scene that would have fooled him just days ago. Now he noticed the tension in Lily's small shoulders, the mechanical way she followed Vanessa's instructions, the relief that flooded her eyes when she saw him. "Daddy!" Lily ran to him, flour dusting her cheeks. "We're making chocolate chip cookies, your favorite." Richard lifted her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair. "That's wonderful, Princess. Why don't you go wash up and I'll be right there to help." Once Lily had left the kitchen, Vanessa turned to him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "How was your meeting? You've been gone all day." "Productive," Richard replied, watching her carefully. "I visited Elizabeth afterward." Something flickered across Vanessa's face, so quick he might have missed it if he hadn't been looking for it. Annoyance? Fear? "Oh, any change?" "Actually, yes, Dr. Sharma noticed some unusual brain activity. She thinks Elizabeth might be improving." The spatula in Vanessa's hand clattered to the counter. She quickly recovered, bending to pick it up with a forced laugh. "How wonderful! But after all this time, it seems unlikely, doesn't it?" "I wouldn't get your hopes up, darling. False hope can be so cruel." Richard maintained his neutral expression. "We'll see. The doctor wants to try a new treatment protocol." "New treatments can be expensive," Vanessa pointed out, her tone carefully modulated. "And after all this time, is it really fair to Lily to redirect resources that could secure her future? Elizabeth would want us to focus on Lily now." "I think Elizabeth would want us to do both," Richard replied, his voice hardening slightly. "Money isn't an issue, as you well know." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Richard met Jake in his study to review Maria's evidence. The recordings were damning, Vanessa's voice transforming from sugary sweetness to venomous hostility the moment Richard was out of earshot, berating Lily for the smallest infractions, threatening to send her away to a special school for difficult children, manipulating her with lies about her father's indifference. "She's been systematically gaslighting both of you," Jake observed grimly as they listened. "Making Lily believe you don't want her around, making you believe Lily is struggling with behavioral issues." Maria's notebook provided meticulous documentation, dates when Lily was denied meals as punishment, instances when she was locked in closets or her room, accidents that seemed suspiciously timed to occur when Lily showed any independence or mentioned her mother. "This is textbook psychological abuse," Jake said. "Enough for a restraining order, possibly criminal charges for child endangerment, but we're still missing pieces about her true identity and motive." Richard nodded, his face grim. "My contact at the bank traced the money from Lily's trust. After passing through Horizon Child Development, it was transferred to offshore accounts, then reappeared in a brokerage account under the name Victoria Carlyle." "We need to know who Victoria Carlyle really is," Jake said. "I've got my best researcher digging into Pennsylvania records. We should have something by morning." Later that night, unable to sleep, Richard stood in the doorway of Lily's room, watching her chest rise and fall in the soft glow of her nightlight. His phone vibrated with a text from Jake. "Check your email. Found something big." In his study, Richard opened the encrypted file Jake had sent. The documentation was sparse but compelling. Birth records from a small town outside Philadelphia, showing that Elizabeth hadn't been an only child as she'd always claimed. She'd had a sister, not a cousin, born Victoria Elizabeth Carlyle, twin to Elizabeth Victoria Carlyle. Accompanying the birth certificates was a decades-old newspaper clipping reporting a family tragedy. 8-year-old Victoria had been sent to live with distant relatives after an unfortunate incident involving her twin. Details were vague, but court records indicated juvenile psychiatric intervention. Richard stared at the grainy photo of two identical little girls, their arms around each other, identical smiles masking the darkness that would eventually tear them apart. The resemblance to Vanessa was unmistakable. His phone rang. Jake again. "Did you see it?" "Yes," Richard whispered, his mind racing. "Elizabeth's twin sister. She never mentioned having a sister, let alone a twin." "There's more," Jake said grimly. "My contact at the hospital just called. Someone tried to access Elizabeth's room 30 minutes ago. A woman matching Vanessa's description, claiming to be her sister. The new night nurse wasn't familiar with the approved visitor list and almost let her in. Security intervened when she couldn't produce ID. A cold chill ran down Richard's spine. I'm calling the hospital to add security and update the visitor list. Then I'm checking on Lily." He hurried to Lily's room, relief washing over him when he found her sleeping peacefully. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something that made his blood freeze. A small empty prescription bottle on her nightstand that hadn't been there earlier. The label read Children's Sleep Aid, a medication he'd never approved. With trembling hands, Richard gently woke his daughter. "Lily, princess, wake up for a minute. Did you take any medicine tonight?" Lily blinked groggily. "Mommy Vanessa gave me special vitamins to help me sleep better. She said you knew about them." Fighting to keep his voice calm, Richard asked, "How many did she give you, sweetheart?" "That 2 purple ones. They taste like grape." Lily's eyes were already drifting closed again. Richard called Dr. Sharma immediately, describing the medication. "It's likely an over-the-counter children's sleep aid," she reassured him. 2 wouldn't be dangerous, but I wouldn't recommend giving them to a child her age without consulting a pediatrician. Monitor her breathing to be safe. Richard spent the rest of the night in a chair beside Lily's bed, watching over her as a new, terrifying suspicion took root in his mind. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern too disturbing to ignore. Victoria Carlyle, Elizabeth's estranged twin sister, had infiltrated their lives under a false identity, systematically abused Lily, drained her trust fund, and now had attempted to gain unauthorized access to Elizabeth's hospital room shortly after learning of her improved condition. This wasn't just about money or jealousy. Something far more sinister was unfolding, something that had begun years ago with Elizabeth's accident and now threatened Lily as well. As dawn broke over the Westbrook estate, Richard made a decision. It was time to set a trap. Chapter 4. Shadows and Light. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor hues as Richard finalized his plan with Jake in the garden gazebo, far from the mansion's surveillance system. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of eucalyptus from the surrounding hills. "It's too dangerous," Jake argued, his voice low. "If Victoria realizes we know her true identity, she might accelerate whatever she's planning." "That's exactly why we need to act now," Richard countered. "She's already trying to access Elizabeth at the hospital. She's drugging Lily. We can't wait for her to make another move." Jake sighed, rubbing his stubbled chin. "Fine, but we do this carefully. I've arranged for additional security at the hospital. Plain clothes, not obvious. Elizabeth's visitor list has been restricted to you and Dr. Sharma only." "What about the background check on Victoria?" Richard asked. "My researcher is still digging, but she found juvenile records that had been sealed. It took some doing to access them legally." Jake handed Richard a folder. "Victoria was institutionalized at age 8 after an incident involving Elizabeth. The details are vague, privacy laws for minors, but there are references to escalating harmful behavior and pathological jealousy toward her twin." Richard flipped through the sparse documentation. "Where was she after that?" "Various institutions until 18, then the trail gets murky. She seems to have used multiple identities over the years. Vanessa Carlyle appears about 5 years ago, right around the time Elizabeth's accident happened." A chill ran down Richard's spine. "That can't be coincidence." "No," Jake agreed grimly. "I also found something else. Victoria had a history of impersonating Elizabeth even as a child. Teachers noted confusion when Elizabeth suddenly couldn't remember lessons she'd mastered the day before, or when her handwriting changed dramatically between assignments. Twin swapping," Richard murmured. "Elizabeth never mentioned any of this to me." According to these records, their parents legally separated Victoria from the family. Elizabeth may have been too young to remember clearly, or was told Victoria had gone to live with relatives. Either way, the system failed. Victoria should have remained under supervision. She was diagnosed with several serious conditions. Richard stared at the peaceful garden, trying to reconcile these revelations with the woman he'd welcomed into his home, his life, his daughter's life. How did I miss this? How did I not see who she really was? Sociopaths can be incredibly charming and convincing, Jake said. They study people, learn exactly what they want to hear. You were grieving, vulnerable, focused on Lily. Victoria saw an opportunity and exploited it. But why? What's her endgame? Jake's expression darkened. Based on the pattern, I'd say she's been systematically replacing Elizabeth in every aspect of her life. Her home, her husband, her child, her identity. The financial angle is secondary, a means to an end rather than the primary motive. And now that Elizabeth might be recovering, Victoria's timeline is threatened, Jake finished, which makes her unpredictable and dangerous. We need to protect both Lily and Elizabeth while gathering enough evidence to remove Victoria permanently from your lives. They agreed on a strategy. Richard would maintain normalcy at home while increasing security measures around Lily. Jake would accelerate the background investigation and coordinate with hospital security. Most importantly, they would set up surveillance to catch Victoria in the act of abuse or financial fraud, concrete evidence that would hold up in court. As Richard returned to the house, he found Lily and Vanessa Victoria in the kitchen. Victoria was making pancakes, her movements graceful and precise. Lily sat at the counter, her posture rigid, eyes watchful. "Good morning, my loves," Victoria called cheerfully. "You're up early, Richard. Beautiful day for a walk in the garden. Just getting some fresh air." "Thinking about work," Richard replied, forcing a smile. "Those pancakes smell amazing." Victoria beamed, the perfect picture of domestic bliss. "Lily helped with the batter, didn't you, sweetheart? We're becoming quite the little team in the kitchen." Lily's eyes met Richard's briefly, a silent message passing between them. Richard felt a surge of protective rage that he carefully concealed. "Wonderful. I thought I might take Lily to visit the Science Museum today. They have a new exhibit on space exploration she might enjoy." A flicker of annoyance crossed Victoria's face before her smile reasserted itself. "On a school day? I don't know if that's sending the right message about the importance of education. Darling, it's Saturday, Vanessa," Richard pointed out mildly. Victoria laughed, a melodic sound that now seemed hollow to Richard's ears. "Of course it is. Silly me, losing track of days with all the excitement around here." She flipped a pancake with expert precision. "Actually, I had planned a special day for Lily and me. Girl time, you know. I've booked us a spa day. Mother-daughter manicures, lunch at that cute bistro she loves." Richard noticed Lily's shoulders tense at the prospect. "That sounds lovely. But Lily mentioned wanting to see the space exhibit when I tucked her in last night. Didn't you, princess?" Lily nodded hesitantly. "The commercial showed a real astronaut suit you can try on." Victoria's spatula clattered against the edge of the pan. "Well, we can certainly do that another day. My appointments are non-refundable, Richard. Perhaps you could join us for lunch at least." "I think Lily and I need some father-daughter time," Richard said firmly. "We haven't had much of that lately." Victoria's expression hardened momentarily before she recovered, turning to Lily with a tight smile. "Well then, sweetheart, we'll do our special spa day next weekend. Go get dressed while I finish breakfast." As Lily slipped from her stool, Victoria added in a syrupy voice, "Don't forget to take your vitamins before you go. Lily, they're on your nightstand." Richard intervened smoothly. "Actually, I spoke with Dr. Chen yesterday. He suggested we hold off on those supplements for now. Apparently they can interact with the allergy medication Lily takes sometimes." Victoria's hand froze mid-motion. "You spoke with her pediatrician?" "Without consulting me. Just a routine check-in," Richard replied, watching her carefully. "As her father, I like to stay informed about her health care." The pancake in the pan began to smoke, momentarily diverting Victoria's attention. By the time she'd salvaged breakfast, her pleasant mask was firmly back in place, though Richard could sense the calculation happening behind her eyes. While Lily dressed for their outing, Richard received a text from Jake. Hospital security caught someone attempting to access Elizabeth's medical records electronically from an off-site location. IP address traced to your home network. Richard's blood ran cold. He texted back, "When?" "About 20 minutes ago." Unsuccessful attempt, but concerning. Have added electronic security measures to her file. At the Science Museum, away from Victoria's watchful presence, Lily gradually relaxed. Among the interactive exhibits and enthusiastic school groups, she transformed into a different child, curious, engaged, occasionally even giggling at the hands-on demonstrations. Richard photographed her proudly trying on the miniature astronaut helmet, her smile wide and genuine for the first time in months. During a quiet moment in the planetary exhibit, as they sat beneath a massive model of Saturn, Lily leaned against Richard's side. "Daddy, is Mommy ever going to wake up?" The question caught Richard off guard. "I don't know, Princess. The doctors are trying some new treatments that might help." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Mommy Vanessa said Mommy is never coming back. She said it's better if I forget about her." Richard chose his next words carefully. "Lily, what else has Mommy Vanessa told you about your mom?" Lily fidgeted with the hem of her dress. "She said Mommy didn't really want to be a mommy. That's why she had her accident. But I don't believe her. Mommy loved me, right?" "More than anything in the world," Richard assured her, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Your mom was so excited to have you, to watch you grow up. She used to say you were her greatest adventure. I remember her singing to me," Lily said softly. "Mommy Vanessa doesn't like when I talk about that. She gets that scary face." "Scary face?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "When she looks like she wants to hurt something. It happens when I mention Mommy, or when I look at Mommy's pictures, or when you pay attention to me instead of her." Richard pulled his daughter closer. "Lily, I want you to know something very important. If Mommy Vanessa ever scares you, or asks you to keep secrets, or does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you can always tell me. I will believe you and I will protect you. Do you understand?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Is something bad happening, Daddy?" Richard kissed the top of her head. "Some grown-up problems, Princess, but I'm going to fix them. I promise." That afternoon, while Lily napped, exhausted from their museum adventure, Richard met with Jake and his associate, a cybersecurity expert named Melissa Chen. "Victoria tried to access Elizabeth's medical records remotely," Melissa explained, showing Richard the digital trail on her laptop. "The attempt came from your home network using your credentials." "My credentials? That's impossible. I haven't logged into the hospital portal from home." "No, but your password manager might have stored the information," Melissa pointed out. "Do you use the same password for multiple accounts?" Richard shook his head. "Never. I'm paranoid about security, occupational hazard in my industry." "Well, someone has access to your accounts. The hospital's security system flagged the attempt because it came from an unusual location, but it had valid credentials." Jake frowned. "Richard, where do you keep your emergency information? House alarm codes, passwords, that sort of thing?" "In my office safe. Only I know the combination." Richard paused, a memory surfacing. "But about a month ago I found the safe open. I assumed I'd forgotten to close it properly after retrieving some documents." "She's been systematically infiltrating every aspect of your life," Jake said grimly. "We need to change all your passwords immediately and implement two-factor authentication on everything, especially Elizabeth's medical portal." As they worked through security protocols, Richard's phone rang, Dr. Sharma from the hospital. "Mr. Westbrook, I wanted to update you personally. We've started the new treatment protocol for Elizabeth, and the initial response is encouraging. There's been a measurable increase in brain activity in areas associated with consciousness. It's still early, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in Richard's chest. "Thank you, Doctor. I'll come by this evening." After ending the call, Richard turned to Jake. "Elizabeth is showing improvement with the new treatment." "Real improvement," Jake nodded thoughtfully, "which puts Victoria on a countdown. If Elizabeth regains consciousness, her entire charade collapses. She'll try something soon," Richard realized. "We need to be ready." That evening, Richard informed Victoria he needed to work late at the office, watching carefully for her reaction. A brief flash of calculation crossed her features before she responded with practiced understanding. "Of course, darling. Will you be home for dinner at least?" "I'm not sure. Don't wait up." Richard kissed Lily goodbye, whispering in her ear, "Remember what we talked about? I love you, Princess." Instead of going to his office, Richard drove to the hospital, where he spent 2 hours with Elizabeth. talking to her about Lily, about the life they'd shared, about his newfound awareness of all he'd taken for granted. As he spoke, he could have sworn her fingers twitched against his, though Dr. Sharma cautioned against reading too much into involuntary movements. Meanwhile, Jake's team had installed additional surveillance equipment throughout the Westbrook mansion, focusing on Lily's room and the main living areas. Richard could now monitor everything remotely through a secure app on his phone. Shortly after 9 o'clock, as Richard sat in his car in the hospital parking garage watching the feed, he observed Victoria entering Lily's room with a glass of water and what appeared to be medication. With mounting horror, he watched as she administered not 2 but 4 pills to a drowsy Lily. "She's increasing the dosage," Richard said into his phone, where Jake was also monitoring. "Why would she? Look at what she's doing now," Jake interrupted. On screen, Victoria was methodically packing a small suitcase with Lily's clothes and a few toys. She moved with efficient precision, occasionally checking her watch. "She's planning to take Lily somewhere," Richard realized, already starting his car. "Tonight. Don't confront her yet," Jake warned. "We need to know where she's going, what she's planning. My team is in position around your property. No one will let her leave with Lily." For the next hour, Richard watched in agonizing suspense as Victoria continued preparations, making phone calls in hushed tones and checking flight information on her laptop. When she pulled out a manila envelope and began reviewing what appeared to be passports, Richard had seen enough. "She has false identification for Lily," he said to Jake. "I'm going home now." "Wait for backup," Jake insisted. "Victoria is cornered and desperate. That makes her dangerous." But Richard was already pulling out of the parking garage, his heart pounding with a single imperative: protect his daughter at all costs. As his car sped through the night toward the estate, rain began to fall, mirroring the storm building within him. The pieces had finally come together. Victoria Carlyle, the forgotten twin, had spent years plotting her revenge, patiently inserting herself into Elizabeth's life, perhaps even causing the accident that had left her sister incapacitated. Now, with Elizabeth showing signs of recovery and her own position threatened, Victoria was preparing to disappear with Lily. The ultimate act of appropriation and revenge. Richard gripped the steering wheel tighter, pressing down on the accelerator. Behind him, Jake and his team followed at a discreet distance. Ahead, through the rain-slicked roads of Silicon Valley, lay a confrontation years in the making. A final reckoning between 2 families, 2 sisters, and 2 visions of love. As the lights of the Westbrook estate came into view, Richard steeled himself for what lay ahead. The time for observation was over. The time for action had arrived. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Rain lashed against the windshield as Richard's car sped through the winding roads of the affluent Woodside neighborhood. Lightning briefly illuminated the towering redwoods that lined the property, casting grotesque shadows across the manicured landscape. The security gate swung open automatically as his car approached, sensors recognizing the vehicle's signature. Richard parked at the service entrance, careful to avoid the main driveway where Victoria might spot him. The mansion loomed ahead, most windows dark except for the soft glow emanating from Lily's room and the master suite. He checked his phone one last time. Victoria was still in her bedroom, methodically organizing documents while occasionally checking on the sleeping Lily through the connected monitor. "I'm on the property," Richard whispered into his phone. "Where's your team?" "Perimeter secured," Jake replied, his voice tense. 2 agents at the east entrance, 2 covering the rear garden. Maria is stationed in the guest house with eyes on Lily's window. "Wait for us before you go in. There's no time. She's packed Lily's things and has travel documents ready. I can't risk her leaving with my daughter." Richard ended the call, silencing the phone to avoid any noise that might alert Victoria to his presence. The service entrance keypad accepted his code, allowing him to slip into the mudroom undetected. Years of navigating his own home in the dark after late nights at the office served him well as he moved silently through the kitchen and toward the main staircase. Rain drummed against the skylights above, masking any small sounds he might make. Pausing at the bottom of the grand staircase, the same staircase where Elizabeth had been found, Richard felt a momentary vertigo as past and present collided. Had Victoria been here that day, watching her sister fall? Had she engineered the accident that had stolen 4 years of Elizabeth's life and left Lily motherless? The sound of a door opening upstairs pulled him from these dark thoughts. Victoria emerged from the master suite, phone pressed to her ear, voice low but audible in the quiet house. "Everything's arranged. The car will be here at midnight. We'll be at the private airfield by 1. I don't care what it costs. Make sure the pilot understands there can be no flight plan filed. Yes, it has to be tonight." Richard pressed himself into the shadows beneath the stairs, breath held as Victoria descended halfway, paused at the landing, then continued toward Lily's room. The opportunity to confront her warred with his need to understand her full plan. Steeling himself, he waited, watching as she entered his daughter's bedroom. Through the partially open door, he could see Victoria leaning over Lily's bed, checking her pulse with clinical detachment. Satisfied, she moved to the suitcase laid open on the window seat, adding a few final items before closing it. Next came a small medical kit, from which she extracted a syringe and vial. Cold horror washed over Richard. He moved without conscious thought, bursting through the door as Victoria filled the syringe with clear liquid. "Get away from my daughter," he commanded, voice deadly quiet. Victoria startled, nearly dropping the syringe before regaining her composure with remarkable speed. "Richard, you scared me half to death. What are you doing home so early?" "Put down the syringe, Victoria." The name hung in the air between them. Victoria's expression shifted minutely. Surprise, calculation, then a smooth reset to concerned confusion. "Victoria, darling, what are you talking about?" "It's me, Vanessa." She gestured to the medical supplies. "Lily's been having trouble sleeping. Dr. Morris prescribed a mild sedative for her anxiety. I was just—" "Stop lying," Richard interrupted, moving closer, positioning himself between her and Lily's bed. "I know everything. About your real identity, about what you did to Elizabeth, about the money you've been stealing from Lily's trust fund." Victoria's mask slipped, just slightly, a twitch at the corner of her perfect mouth, a hardening in her eyes. "You're tired, Richard. You're not making any sense. Why don't we go downstairs and talk about whatever's bothering you?" "The Pennsylvania State Hospital for Children with Behavioral Disorders," Richard said, watching her face. "Ring any bells? 8 years old, institutionalized after attempting to harm your twin sister. Multiple diagnoses, conduct disorder, pathological jealousy, identity disturbance." The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria's posture straightened, her eyes growing cold and calculating. The pretense of confusion gave way to something harder, more authentic. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice different now, sharper, without the affected warmth she usually employed. "Long enough," Richard replied, never taking his eyes off the syringe still in her hand. "Put that down, step away from Lily, and we can talk." Victoria glanced at the syringe as if surprised to find it still in her hand. With deliberate slowness, she placed it on Lily's dresser. "It's just a sedative, Richard. For the journey. I would never harm her. She's my daughter now, too." "She's not your daughter. She never was." Richard moved to check on Lily, relieved to find her breathing steady, though unnaturally deep. "What did you give her earlier?" "Just children's sleep aid. Perfectly safe, if perhaps a bit more than the recommended dosage." Victoria's smile was chilling in its normalcy. "She'll wake up in a few hours with nothing worse than grogginess." "Why, Victoria? Why all of this? The deception, the abuse, stealing from a child's trust fund?" Victoria laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Still don't see the big picture, do you, Richard? It was never about the money. It was about taking back what should have been mine." She moved to the window, gazing out at the storm. Elizabeth always had everything. The love, the attention, the opportunities. We were identical, completely identical. Yet somehow she was always the special one, the perfect one. When our parents discovered I'd been borrowing her identity occasionally, they sent me away, locked me up like an embarrassing family secret, while precious Elizabeth got to live the charmed life. Lightning illuminated her face, revealing an expression of such raw bitterness that Richard instinctively moved closer to Lily's bed. "I spent years watching her from a distance," Victoria continued. "College, career, meeting you, her perfect husband with his perfect wealth. Then Lily, the perfect child. Elizabeth Victoria Westbrook, living the life that should have been shared with Victoria Elizabeth Carlyle." "So you caused her accident," Richard said, the final piece clicking into place. You pushed your own sister down those stairs and left her to die. Victoria's expression remained unnervingly calm. Accidents happen, Richard, especially when someone is careless enough to leave a stair runner unsecured. The runner was secured. Maria remembers the nails. A dismissive wave, an old woman's faulty memory. No one could prove otherwise. And then you stepped into her life, her cousin coming to help during a family crisis. Victoria smiled thinly. It was remarkably easy. A few social media posts carefully edited to suggest a reconnection. Some basic research about Elizabeth's extended family. You were so distraught, so desperate for help with Lily, you never questioned me. And Elizabeth, of course, couldn't contradict my story. Richard felt sick. You've been planning this for years. I prefer to think of it as reclaiming my birthright, Victoria replied, running her hand over Lily's suitcase. Elizabeth and I should have shared everything equally. When that didn't happen naturally, adjustments became necessary. And Lily, where does she fit into your twisted logic? Victoria's expression softened as she looked at the sleeping child. Lily is the daughter I should have had, the life I should have experienced. I've grown quite attached to her, actually. She reminds me of myself at that age, before everything went wrong. You've been tormenting her, Richard said, struggling to contain his anger. Psychological abuse, neglect, manipulation, all documented, Victoria. All on camera. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. You've been watching me. Richard nodded toward the teddy bear on Lily's shelf, its glass eyes concealing a miniature camera. For weeks now, every lesson you've taught her, every punishment, every twisted mind game, all recorded. The police have enough evidence to put you away for a very long time. Victoria's composure wavered briefly before her features hardened. It doesn't matter. By this time tomorrow, Lily and I will be somewhere you'll never find us. I have resources you know nothing about, identities prepared years ago. We'll disappear and you'll spend the rest of your life wandering, searching, never knowing. That's not going to happen. Richard moved to stand between Victoria and the bedroom door. It's over, Victoria. Jake and his team are surrounding the house as we speak. The police have been notified. There's nowhere for you to go. Victoria's laugh was cold and confident. There's always somewhere to go, Richard. I've been preparing for this contingency since the day I moved in. Did you really think I wouldn't have an escape plan? Her hand moved to her pocket, extracting a small remote control. Home security systems are fascinating, aren't they? So complex, so hackable, especially when you have unlimited access to the house and plenty of time alone. She pressed a button, and immediately alarms began blaring throughout the mansion. Sprinklers activated in the hallway, water cascading down the grand staircase. From downstairs came the sound of security shutters slamming down over doors and windows. Emergency lockdown protocol, Victoria explained calmly over the noise. Designed to protect the family from intruders. All exits sealed, communications jammed. Direct alert to the security company. By the time they realize it's a false alarm, we'll be long gone through the one exit not in the system, the old service tunnel that runs beneath the east wing. Connecting to the gardener's cottage. Richard lunged for his phone, but the signal was already gone, blocked by the security protocol he himself had designed. Victoria watched him with something like pity. You built an impressive fortress, Richard. Ironic that it's now become your prison. Outside Lily's window, Richard caught a glimpse of movement, Jake's team responding to the alarms, unaware they were being manipulated. The house phone would be useless during lockdown, and the security system would take at least 20 minutes to reset remotely. Victoria moved toward Lily's bed. I'm taking her now. Don't try to stop me. You'll have to go through me first, Richard said, planting himself firmly in her path. Victoria sighed, as if disappointed by his predictability. I was hoping to avoid unpleasantness. We could have arranged visitation, you know. I'm not unreasonable. You're delusional, Richard countered. You're not taking my daughter anywhere. The standoff was interrupted by a sound neither of them expected, a soft moan from Lily as she stirred in her bed, fighting through the medication-induced sleep. Daddy? She mumbled, eyes struggling to open. What's that noise? Victoria moved with surprising speed, grabbing the syringe from the dresser. I'm sorry, it has to be this way. Richard intercepted her, catching her wrist as she lunged toward Lily. The syringe clattered to the floor as they grappled. Victoria's strength belying her elegant appearance. She fought with the desperate intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose, scratching and clawing as Richard struggled to restrain her without causing serious harm. "Lily, run!" Richard shouted as Victoria's nails raked across his face. "Go to the bathroom and lock the door." Half conscious, Lily stumbled from the bed, confusion and fear evident in her drugged movements. Victoria broke free from Richard's grip, diving for the child, but Richard tackled her to the ground. They crashed into the bookshelf, sending books and toys raining down around them. Through the chaos of alarms and sprinklers, a new sound penetrated, breaking glass from downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps. Jake's team had breached the security shutters. "In here," Richard shouted, still struggling to subdue Victoria, who fought with the unnatural strength of desperation. Victoria's elbow connected with Richard's temple, momentarily stunning him. She scrambled away, lunging again for Lily, who had made it halfway to the bathroom. "You're coming with me, sweetheart. We're going on an adventure, just the two of us." Before she could reach the child, the bedroom door burst open. Jake and two security specialists rushed in, quickly assessing the situation. As they moved to apprehend Victoria, she backed toward the window, fury and calculation warring in her expression. "This isn't over," she hissed, eyes fixed on Richard. "She was never supposed to wake up. I made sure of it 4 years ago. And now somehow she's recovering. I won't let her take everything from me again." The implication of her words hit Richard like a physical blow. "You've been tampering with Elizabeth's treatment, haven't you? All these years?" Victoria's smile was chilling. "Hospitals are remarkably trusting of family members. A slight adjustment to IV lines during visits, the occasional replacement of medication. Little things, nothing traceable. Just enough to keep her under, in that twilight state. Not quite gone, but never coming back." As Jake's men closed in, Victoria made one last desperate lunge toward Lily. Richard intercepted her, finally managing to restrain her arms as the security team took over. As they secured her wrists with zip ties, Victoria's composure cracked completely, her face contorting with rage. "She doesn't deserve this life," she screamed, struggling against her restraints. She never appreciated what she had. "I would have been a better Elizabeth than she ever was." Ignoring her outburst, Richard rushed to Lily, gathering his trembling daughter in his arms. "It's okay, Princess. You're safe now. I've got you." As Victoria was led from the room, still ranting about her sister and broken promises, Richard held Lily close, whispering reassurances and wiping away her tears. The alarms finally silenced as the security system reset, leaving only the sound of rain against the windows and Lily's soft sobs. "Is the bad lady gone?" Lily whispered, clinging to her father. "Yes, Princess. She's gone and she won't be coming back." Richard smoothed her hair, his own hands shaking with residual adrenaline and relief. "You were so brave. Everything's going to be okay now." As police arrived to take Victoria into custody, Richard sat with Lily in the quiet of her room, piecing together the shattered remnants of their security and trust. The storm outside began to abate, distant thunder rolling away toward the horizon. Like the storm, Victoria had blown through their lives with destructive force, leaving damage that would take time to repair. But as Lily's breathing steadied against his chest, Richard felt the first tentative stirrings of hope. The long nightmare was over. The healing could begin. "Daddy?" Lily murmured, fighting the lingering effects of the medication. "Yes, Princess? Can we go see Mommy tomorrow?" Richard kissed the top of her head, tears pricking his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. We can absolutely go see Mommy tomorrow." As Lily drifted back to sleep in his arms, Richard's phone buzzed with a text message. Service restored, now that the security system had reset. It was from Dr. Sharma at the hospital. "Significant increase in brain activity this evening. Elizabeth squeezed my hand during neurological assessment. Not random movement, appeared deliberate. Call me when you can." Richard held his daughter closer, a single tear tracking down his cheek as he gazed out at the clearing sky. After 4 years of darkness, light was finally breaking through. Chapter 6: Awakening. The sterile hospital corridor stretched before Richard like a path to uncertainty. Lily's small hand clutched his tightly as they approached Elizabeth's room, her steps slowing the closer they got. It had been a turbulent 24 hours since Victoria's arrest, police statements, evidence collection, medical evaluations for Lily, and now this moment they'd both been anticipating and dreading. What if Mommy doesn't remember me? Lily whispered, her voice small in the hushed atmosphere of the long-term care ward. Richard knelt to meet her eyes. Your mom loves you more than anything in the world, Princess. Even if she's still getting better and can't show it right away, that love is always there. Dr. Sharma met them outside Elizabeth's room, her expression cautiously optimistic. There have been significant developments overnight, she explained. Elizabeth is showing consistent responses to verbal commands, squeezing hands, blinking on request. These are important indicators of emerging consciousness. Has she spoken? Richard asked, hope and fear warring in his chest. Not yet. Recovery from prolonged disorders of consciousness happens in stages, but her brain scans show activity patterns consistent with awareness. Dr. Sharma smiled encouragingly at Lily. Would you like to see your mom now? Lily nodded, pressing closer to Richard's side as they entered the room. Elizabeth lay propped slightly upright, her appearance markedly different from the day before. The breathing tube had been removed, replaced by a nasal cannula. Her eyes were closed, but her complexion had more color than Richard had seen in years. The police investigation revealed something troubling, Dr. Sharma said quietly to Richard as Lily cautiously approached the bed. Victoria Carlyle had been visiting regularly, posing as you using forged authorization. Our new nurse finally flagged the discrepancy when she met you in person. We've found evidence suggesting she may have been tampering with Elizabeth's medication and treatment. Richard nodded grimly. She confessed as much during our confrontation. She wanted to ensure Elizabeth never woke up. That explains the sudden improvement once we implemented tighter security protocols, Dr. Sharma replied. Without that interference, Elizabeth's brain has been responding remarkably well to the new treatment regimen. At the bedside, Lily reached out tentatively to touch her mother's hand. Hi, Mommy, she said softly. It's me, Lily. I'm bigger now. I'm 6. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Elizabeth's fingers curled around her daughter's. Lily gasped, looking back at Richard with wide eyes. She squeezed my hand, Daddy. She knows it's me. Richard moved to the bedside, his own hand trembling as he placed it over Elizabeth and Lily's. We're here, Liz, he said, voice thick with emotion. Both of us. We've been waiting for you. Dr. Sharma stepped forward, professional but clearly moved by the moment. Elizabeth, if you can hear me, can you try to open your eyes? Seconds stretched into what felt like eternity. Then, with visible effort, Elizabeth's eyelids fluttered and slowly opened. Her gaze was unfocused at first, roaming the room before settling on Lily's face. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, wonder, love. That's it, Dr. Sharma encouraged. Take your time. Elizabeth's lips moved silently, struggling to form words after years of disuse. Richard held a straw to her lips, helping her take a small sip of water. After several attempts, a single raspy word emerged. Lily. Tears streamed down Richard's face as Lily climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, leaning close to her mother. I knew you'd wake up someday, Mummy. I told my wish to every birthday candle. Over the next few hours, Elizabeth drifted in and out of awareness, each period of consciousness slightly longer than the last. Speech remained difficult, limited to single words and short phrases, but her eyes communicated what her voice could not. Recognition, questions, relief. When Lily stepped out with a nurse to get lunch, Elizabeth's gaze fixed on Richard with new intensity. Her hand fumbled for his, gripping with surprising strength. Victoria, she managed, the name clearly requiring enormous effort. Richard's breath caught. You know, Elizabeth nodded weakly. Saw her before. She gestured vaguely toward herself, frustration evident as words failed her. She's been arrested, Richard assured her. She can't hurt you or Lily anymore. The police have everything they need to keep her locked up for a very long time. Relief softened Elizabeth's features, followed quickly by another emotion, guilt. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to form her next words. Should have told you about her, thought she was gone. Richard shook his head, bringing her hand to his lips. None of this is your fault, Liz. Victoria is ill in ways that aren't your responsibility. I should have seen what was happening in our own home. I should have protected Lily better. A single tear traced down Elizabeth's cheek. Lily, okay, she's going to be. She's strong like her mother. Richard smiled, wiping away her tear. And she's never given up on you, not for a single day. When Lily returned, she carried a slightly lopsided get-well card she'd made in the hospital cafeteria, decorated with enthusiastic crayon stars and hearts. Elizabeth's smile as she received it was weak but radiant, illuminating her face with a ghost of her former vibrancy. As evening approached, Dr. Sharma gently suggested they let Elizabeth rest. This has been an overwhelming day for her brain to process. Recovery will be gradual, with good days and challenging ones ahead. Lily was reluctant to leave, fear creeping back into her expression. What if Mommy goes back to sleep and doesn't wake up again? Elizabeth reached for her daughter with trembling fingers, mustering her limited strength to form 4 precious words. I'll be right here. The promise, though simple, carried the weight of mountains. Lily nodded solemnly, accepting it as the sacred vow it was. In the hospital corridor, Jake waited with updates on Victoria's case. She's being held without bail, he reported as they walked toward the elevator. The evidence is overwhelming. Financial fraud, identity theft, child endangerment, tampering with medical equipment. The DA is also investigating her role in Elizabeth's original accident. Richard nodded, his mind already moving past punishment to protection. What about security? I don't want Victoria having any way to reach Elizabeth or Lily, not even through proxies. Already handled. We've implemented a comprehensive security protocol at both the hospital and your home. Victoria has been denied all communication privileges except with her court-appointed attorney. Speaking of home, Jake added carefully, have you thought about whether you want to return to the estate? Many families find it difficult to stay in a residence where trauma occurred. The question caught Richard off guard. The Westbrook estate had been his pride, the physical manifestation of his success. Yet now its grand rooms and manicured gardens felt tainted by Victoria's presence. The carefully designed security features twisted into weapons against his own family. I don't know, he admitted, looking down at Lily, who was uncharacteristically quiet. What do you think, Princess? Would you like to live somewhere new? Lily considered this, with the solemn deliberation of a child who had learned that life-changing decisions could arrive without warning. Could we find a house with a big tree for a swing? And no dark attic? Absolutely, Richard promised. And maybe a room with a view of the sunrise for Mommy when she comes home. Lily nodded decisively. Then I think we should move. The old house has too many bad memories. From the mouths of babes, Richard thought. In her simple assessment, Lily had articulated what he'd been feeling but couldn't express. The mansion had ceased to be a home the moment Victoria had corrupted it with her deception and cruelty. That evening, after settling Lily with Maria at a hotel suite Jake had arranged, Richard returned to the estate one last time. Yellow police tape still cordoned off certain areas, evidence collection ongoing in Victoria's private spaces. The grand foyer where he had once welcomed clients and colleagues now felt hollow, its elegance a thin veneer over uglier truths. In his study, Richard gathered the few items that truly mattered: family photos from before the accident, Lily's baby book, the matching wedding bands he and Elizabeth had chosen together. Everything else, the furniture, art, cars, and were just things, replaceable and ultimately meaningless compared to what he'd nearly lost. As he closed the study door for the final time, Richard caught sight of the grand staircase where Elizabeth's life had been derailed 4 years earlier. In his mind's eye, he could see Victoria there, watching her sister fall, satisfaction mingling with envy on her identical face. The image solidified his decision. This house would never be home again. Outside, the evening air carried the scent of eucalyptus and distant rain. Richard paused on the front steps, looking back at the mansion that had been both dream and prison. Tomorrow he would contact real estate agents. There would be a new home, one without shadows, one worthy of the second chance they'd all been given. Over the following weeks, Elizabeth's recovery progressed with the unpredictable rhythm of all brain healing, breakthroughs followed by plateaus, triumphs alongside frustrations. Speech therapy helped her regain more complex language, though conversation still tired her quickly. Physical therapy revealed the extent of muscle atrophy, necessitating intense rehabilitation before walking would be possible. Through it all, Lily visited daily, bringing drawings, stories, and the innocent determination only children can maintain. She read books to her mother, described her day at school, and patiently repeated herself when Elizabeth's focus wavered. Their bond, dormant but never broken, flourished anew. Richard divided his time between the hospital, house hunting, and carefully reconstructing Westbrook Technologies with a dramatically different work-life balance. The driven CEO, who had once regularly slept in his office, now delegated liberally, attended school events without fail, and ended each day at Elizabeth's bedside. 3 months after Victoria's arrest on a clear spring morning, Elizabeth spoke the words they'd been waiting for. "I want to go home." Dr. Sharma, while cautious, agreed that Elizabeth had progressed enough for outpatient care. "She'll need daily therapy, round-the-clock nursing initially, and your home will require modifications for accessibility." "All already arranged," Richard assured her. "The new house has everything she'll need." The new house was a sunlit contemporary home overlooking the Pacific in Monterey, single level for accessibility, with floor-to-ceiling windows that brought nature indoors. It was as different from the oppressive woodside mansion as possible. A dedicated rehabilitation room had been equipped with all the necessary therapeutic equipment. The master suite featured specialized bed and bathroom fixtures to accommodate Elizabeth's limited mobility. Most importantly, it had no history, no shadows, only the promise of new beginnings. The day Elizabeth came home, truly home. For the first time in 4 years, Lily decorated the entire house with welcome banners and hand-painted signs. As the wheelchair van pulled into the driveway, her excitement became nearly uncontainable. "Remember, Princess," Richard reminded her gently, "Mommy still gets tired easily. We need to take things slowly." Lily nodded solemnly, though her bouncing feet betrayed her enthusiasm. "I remember." I made her a quiet corner in the sunroom with pillows and books and her favorite music, for when she needs rest. The thoughtfulness of this gesture, so mature for a 6-year-old, brought tears to Richard's eyes. The trauma of Victoria's abuse had left its mark on Lily, manifesting in hypervigilance and occasional nightmares, but it had also developed in her an extraordinary capacity for empathy. When Elizabeth was settled in the sunny living room, taking in her new surroundings with visible wonder, Lily carefully climbed onto the sofa beside her. "Do you like our new house, Mommy?" "I helped pick the colors." Elizabeth smiled, her movements still slightly asymmetrical but growing stronger each day. "It's beautiful," she said, each word deliberate but clear. "Just like you." As afternoon stretched into evening, Richard watched his wife and daughter reconnecting, sharing stories and small confidences. The road ahead remained long. Elizabeth's recovery would continue for months, perhaps years. Victoria's trial loomed in the future, certain to resurrect painful memories. Lily's healing from psychological trauma had only just begun. Yet in this moment, surrounded by the golden California light, streaming through windows that faced toward tomorrow rather than yesterday, Richard allowed himself to fully believe what he'd only dared hope before. They were going to be okay. Not unchanged, not unmarked by what they'd endured, but whole in a new way, stronger at the broken places. As the sun began to set over the Pacific, casting the room in amber and rose, Elizabeth caught Richard's eye across the space that separated them. In her gaze, he saw recognition of all they'd lost and found, all they'd endured and overcome. Most of all, he saw the same promise he'd made to himself in those darkest days. Never again would work or ambition or anything else take precedence over this. The irreplaceable treasure of family, of presence, of love. Elizabeth extended her hand toward him, an invitation and a bridge across the 4 years they'd lost. Richard crossed the room to take it, completing the circle as he sat beside her and Lily. "We're home," Elizabeth said simply, her voice growing stronger with each word she reclaimed from silence. "All of us, finally home." Chapter 7. Full Circle. 1 year later. The California coastline stretched like a golden ribbon beneath the summer sun as Lily raced across the beach. Her laughter carried on the salt-tinged breeze. At 7, she had grown taller, her once hesitant movements now exuberant and free. Behind her, moving with careful but increasingly confident steps, Elizabeth walked with the assistance of a sleek carbon fiber cane. Her progress marked not in great leaps, but in the steady accumulation of small victories. Richard watched from the beach blanket where he'd been organizing their picnic, his heart full at the sight of his wife and daughter, silhouetted against the sparkling Pacific. A year ago, this ordinary family outing would have seemed an impossible dream. "They're getting faster," Maria observed beside him, unpacking sandwiches from the wicker basket. Now officially the Westbrooks' housekeeper again, her role had expanded to include friend and confidant. Soon Mrs. Elizabeth won't need that cane at all. The physical therapist thinks she might be ready to set it aside by Christmas, Richard agreed, though she'll probably always have good days and harder ones. The past year had been a journey of recovery on multiple fronts. Elizabeth's physical rehabilitation had progressed from wheelchair to walker to cane, each transition celebrated like a summit reached. Her speech had returned almost completely, though complex sentences still occasionally eluded her when tired. Cognitive therapy had helped rebuild neural pathways, restoring most of her memory and executive function, albeit with permanent gaps around the time of her accident. For Lily, healing had taken different forms. Play therapy helped her process the trauma of Victoria's psychological abuse. Nightmares that once came nightly now appeared only occasionally, usually triggered by stress or changes in routine. Her tendency to hoard food, a response to Victoria's manipulative withholding, was gradually fading as security and consistency rebuilt her trust. Richard's own transformation had been perhaps the most profound, if less visible. The driven entrepreneur who had once measured success in acquisitions and market share now defined it differently. In Lily's increasingly confident smile, in Elizabeth's hard-won steps, in quiet evenings spent together rather than alone in an office, Westbrook Technologies continued to thrive, but under a restructured leadership that allowed its founder to be present for school plays and therapy appointments, weekend adventures and ordinary Tuesday dinners. "They're calling us," Maria nudged Richard, pointing to where Elizabeth and Lily were waving from the shoreline, beckoning him to join them. As Richard jogged across the sand, he reflected on how this peaceful moment had been earned through the darkest of trials. Victoria's case had concluded 3 months earlier with a comprehensive plea deal, multiple felony convictions resulting in a 30-year sentence without possibility of early parole. The evidence had been too overwhelming for even the most aggressive defense to counter. Financial fraud documented in Victoria's own meticulous records, psychological abuse captured on home security footage, medical tampering proven through hospital logs and witness testimony. Most damning had been Victoria's own journal, discovered in a hidden wall safe in the Woodside mansion. Its pages revealed a disturbed mind's obsessive fixation on replacing her twin sister, detailed plans spanning years, and chilling reflections on the day she had loosened the stair runner and watched Elizabeth fall. The journal had provided answers to questions that had haunted the family. How Victoria had discovered Elizabeth's existence after years of separation, obsessive internet stalking, how she had accessed Richard's accounts, carefully observing his password entries during her helpful visits after the accident, why she had targeted Lily with particular cruelty, viewing her as the ultimate prize in her campaign to appropriate Elizabeth's life. Reaching the water's edge, Richard lifted Lily into his arms, spinning her around as she squealed with delight. Elizabeth watched them, her smile reflecting both joy in the present and acknowledgement of all they had overcome to reach this moment. "Mom's walking all the way to the rocks today," Lily announced proudly when Richard set her down. "It's her farthest ever." Elizabeth laughed, a sound that had once seemed lost forever, with plenty of rest stops. But yes, a new personal record. They walked together along the shoreline, Lily darting ahead to collect shells and interesting stones, bringing her treasures back for approval, before adding them to the growing collection in her bucket. Elizabeth's pace was measured but determined, each step a quiet declaration of resilience. "I had a call from Dr. Chen this morning," Richard said, as they paused to watch a pod of dolphins in the distance. "Lily's latest evaluation shows significant improvement. He believes she's processing the trauma in healthy ways." Elizabeth nodded, her gaze following their daughter. "She still has moments, that watchfulness, the way she sometimes checks to make sure we're still there. But they're becoming less frequent." She leaned slightly against Richard's arm. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe and loved." "Like their mothers," Richard replied, kissing the top of her head. The neuropsychologist had warned them that Elizabeth would likely never recover all her memories from the years before the accident. The brain, trying to protect itself, had sealed away certain traumas, particularly those related to her childhood with Victoria. Elizabeth had expressed only relief at this selective amnesia. "Some things are better left in darkness," she'd said when reviewing the case files. "I prefer to focus on making new memories now." Their peaceful reflections were interrupted by Lily's excited shout from several yards ahead. "Dad, Mom, come quick! I found something amazing." They made their way to where Lily crouched beside a tidal pool, pointing at something beneath the crystal-clear water. As they knelt beside her, they saw it, a perfect sand dollar, unmarred and complete. "It's whole," Lily whispered, with the reverence children reserve for true wonders. Ms. Reynolds at school said finding a whole one is super rare. Most get broken by the waves. Richard carefully reached into the shallow water, lifting the delicate treasure and placing it in Lily's waiting palms. Some things are strong enough to stay whole, even after being tossed by the strongest storms. Lily looked up at her parents, understanding beyond her years flickering in her expression. "Like us?" "Exactly like us," Elizabeth confirmed, smoothing her daughter's wind-blown hair. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they gathered their belongings for the short walk back to their home. The coastal property had proven to be more than just a house. It had become a sanctuary, its open spaces and abundant light gradually erasing the psychological shadows Victoria had cast over their lives. As they crested the dune that separated beach from garden, the modern glass and cedar structure came into view, its warm interior lights already glowing welcomingly in the approaching dusk. Through the wall of windows, they could see Jake and his wife setting the outdoor dining table on the deck. Weekend guests bringing laughter and normalcy back into lives that had been isolated for too long. "Race you to the house," Lily challenged, already sprinting ahead, her energy seemingly limitless. Richard moved to follow, but Elizabeth held him back for a moment, her eyes reflecting the deepening blue of the evening sky. "Sometimes I still can't believe we made it here," she said softly. "That we found our way back to each other through all of that darkness." Richard wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her as they began the gentle climb toward home. "I used to think success meant building something that would outlast me. The company, the fortune, the legacy. I was so wrong. This is what matters. Being present. Being together." Elizabeth leaned into his embrace, her steps matching his as they followed their daughter's joyful path homeward. Victoria never understood that. For all her desperate efforts to take my place, she missed the only thing that made any of it worthwhile: love freely given and received, not stolen or forced. The mention of Victoria, rare in their daily conversations, hung briefly in the air between them. Her shadow had diminished over the months, but would never completely vanish. She remained confined at a secure psychiatric facility in Northern California, her communication with the outside world strictly limited and monitored. The restraining orders would remain in effect permanently, ensuring she could never again approach any member of the Westbrook family. "Do you ever wonder," Richard began carefully, "about visiting her?" "Not now, but someday." Elizabeth considered this as they paused at the garden gate. "I've thought about it. The therapist says it might eventually provide closure, but not yet." She looked toward the house where Lily was already excitedly showing her sand dollar to Jake. "My priority is building something Victoria can never touch or taint. Our future." Inside the house, warmth and conversation awaited. The dining table was set for 8, the Westbrooks, Jake and his wife, Maria and her husband, and Dr. Sharma with her partner. This newfound community had developed organically in the aftermath of crisis, people drawn together by extraordinary circumstances who had discovered ordinary friendship in the rebuilding. Dinner was a relaxed affair of shared dishes and overlapping conversations. Elizabeth, once the quietest among them due to her ongoing speech challenges, now contributed with growing confidence. Lily moved between adult conversations with the self-assurance of a child who knew she was truly seen and heard by the grown-ups in her life. As dessert was served, Maria's famous tres leches cake, Jake raised his glass in a toast. "To 1 year in this beautiful home, and to the strongest family I know." Glasses clinked as the sentiment was echoed around the table. Under the warm glow of pendant lights, surrounded by people who had become like extended family, Richard felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with business achievements or material success. Later that night, after guests had departed and Lily was asleep, Richard and Elizabeth stood on their bedroom balcony, watching moonlight silver the restless surface of the ocean. Elizabeth had progressed to the point where she required assistance only for the most physically demanding tasks, her independence returning in increments that continued to surprise and delight them. "I received a letter from the prosecutor's office today," Richard said quietly. "They've identified 3 other families Victoria targeted over the years, situations where she insinuated herself into the lives of women who resembled her, though none as thoroughly or for as long as she did with you." Elizabeth absorbed this information with the calm that had become her hallmark. Were there children involved? One family had a daughter. Victoria had begun establishing herself as a trusted family friend. "Before she found me again," Elizabeth concluded. "I was always her primary fixation." Richard nodded. "The prosecutor believes our case has potentially prevented similar situations. The detailed evidence has created a profile that's helping identify other cases of identity-based stalking and psychological abuse." Elizabeth turned from the moonlit view to face her husband. "Then something meaningful has come from our pain. That matters." In the soft darkness, Richard studied his wife's face, thinner than before the accident, with new lines etching the corners of her eyes, but animated by the same essential spirit he'd fallen in love with years ago. The journey back to each other had been arduous, marked by setbacks and challenges that continued even now. Yet here they stood, together on the balcony of a home built on new foundations, both literally and figuratively. "I was thinking about Lily's sand dollar," Elizabeth said after a comfortable silence. "How it survived the power of the ocean intact." "A perfect metaphor for her mother," Richard observed, drawing her closer. Elizabeth smiled against his shoulder. "For all of us, I think. Not unmarked by what we've endured, but unbroken, still capable of wonder and joy." Below their balcony, the garden path wound down to the beach, illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. At the garden's center stood a small Japanese maple, its delicate leaves rustling in the gentle night breeze. They had planted it on the day they moved in, a living symbol of new beginnings, taking root in soil untainted by the past. "I've been thinking about going back to work," Elizabeth said, the statement both casual and monumental. Before the accident, she had been a rising environmental attorney, her career temporarily set aside when Lily was born. Not full-time, at least not yet. But the Ocean Conservation Foundation reached out about consulting on their legal team. "I could work remotely, set my own hours." Richard turned to face her fully, searching her expression. "Are you sure you're ready?" "Dr. Sharma thinks it would be beneficial for my cognitive recovery. And it feels right, using my mind for something meaningful again." She touched his face gently. "Victoria tried to erase who I was, not just as a wife and mother, but as a person with purpose beyond family roles. Reclaiming that part of myself feels like the final piece of healing." Pride and love surged through Richard as he recognized the quiet determination that had first drawn him to Elizabeth years ago. "I think it's a wonderful idea. Lily will be proud to see her mom changing the world." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a small voice called from inside the bedroom. "Mommy, Daddy?" They turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, her stuffed elephant clutched tightly against her chest. "I had the dream again," she said, her voice small but not frightened. This particular dream had recurred occasionally throughout her recovery, not exactly a nightmare, but unsettling enough to wake her. In it, Lily found herself locked in a room with no doors, only windows that showed her family just beyond reach. Elizabeth moved to her daughter, kneeling despite the effort it still required. "Remember what Dr. Chen taught us? Even in dreams you can create your own doors." Lily nodded, already calmer in her mother's embrace. "I did. I made a really big door with a rainbow handle and I walked right through it." Pride tinged her voice at this accomplishment. "But I still wanted to check that you were here." "We're always here," Richard assured her, joining the embrace. "And we're very proud of you for making that door." Instead of returning Lily to her own room, they settled her between them in their bed, an occasional comfort still needed in this ongoing journey of healing. As Lily's breathing deepened into sleep, Elizabeth and Richard exchanged glances over her tousled head, their connection wordlessly acknowledging both how far they had come and the path still ahead. Outside, the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore provided a constant reminder of nature's persistence, how water, given time, could smooth the sharpest stones, how the tide always returned, regardless of what had transpired in its absence, how the ocean, vast and powerful, continued its eternal cycle of destruction and renewal. The Westbrook family had been tested by extraordinary darkness, by jealousy twisted into obsession, by deception elevated to art, by the patient malevolence of a damaged soul. That they had emerged intact was testament not to any immunity from suffering, but to the resilience forged in its crucible. As moonlight painted silver patterns across their bed, Richard reflected on the strange, terrible gift Victoria had inadvertently given them, the knowledge that nothing, no career advancement, no financial success, no social status, mattered more than these quiet moments of connection. In her desperate attempt to steal Elizabeth's life, Victoria had ultimately taught